The Secret of Chimneys by Agatha Christie. Chapter 18, Second Midnight Adventure. The first person that Anthony saw as he alighted from his train on the following afternoon was Superintendent Battle. His face broke into a smile. "I've returned according to contract," he remarked. "Did you come down here to assure yourself of the fact?" Battle shook his head. "I wasn't worrying about that, Mr. Cade. I happened to be going to London, that's all." "You have such a trustful nature, Battle." "Do you think so, sir?" "No, I think you're deep, very deep. Still waters, you know, and all that sort of thing. So you're going to London?" "I am, Mr. Cade." "I wonder why." The detective did not reply. "You're so chatty," remarked Anthony. "That's what I like about you." A far-off twinkle showed in Battle's eyes. "What about your own little job, Mr. Cade?" he inquired. "How did that go off?" "I've drawn a blank, Battle. For the second time I've been proved hopelessly wrong. Galling, isn't it?" "What was the idea, sir, if I may ask?" "I suspected the French governess, Battle. A, upon the grounds of her being the most unlikely person, according to the canons of the best fiction. B, because there was a light in her room on the night of the tragedy." "That wasn't much to go upon." "You're quite right. It was not. But I discovered that she had only been here a short time, and I also found a suspicious Frenchman spying around the place. You know all about him, I suppose?" "You mean the man who calls himself Monsieur Shells, staying at the Cricketers, a traveller in silk?" "That's it, is it? What about him? What does Scotland Yard think?" "His actions have been very suspicious," said Superintendent Battle expressionlessly. "Very suspicious, I should say. Well, I put two and two together. French governess in this house, French stranger outside. I decided they were in league together, and I hurried off to interview the lady with whom Mademoiselle Brun had lived for the last 10 years. I was fully prepared to find out that she had never heard of any such person as Mademoiselle Brun, but I was wrong, Battle. Mademoiselle is a genuine article." Battle nodded. "I must admit," said Anthony, "that as soon as I spoke to her I had an uneasy conviction that I was barking up the wrong tree. She seemed so absolutely the governess." Again Battle nodded. "All the same, Mr. Cade, you can't always go by that. Women especially can do a lot with make-up. I've seen quite a pretty girl with the colour of her hair altered, a sallow complexion stain, slightly reddened eyelids, and, most efficacious of all, dowdy clothes, who would fail to be identified by 9 people out of 10 who had seen her in her former character. Men haven't got quite the same pull. You can do something with the eyebrows, and, of course, different sets of false teeth alter the whole expression. But there are always the ears. There's an extraordinary lot of character in ears, Mr. Cade." "Don't look so hard at mine, Battle," complained Anthony. "You make me quite nervous." "I'm not talking of false beards and grease paint," continued the superintendent. "That's only for books. No, there are very few men who can escape identification and put it over on you. In fact, there's only one man I know who has a positive genius for impersonation. King Victor. Ever heard of King Victor, Mr. Cade?" There was something so sharp and sudden about the way the detective put the question that Anthony checked the words were rising to his lips. "King Victor?" he said reflectively instead. "Somehow I seem to have heard of the name. One of the most celebrated jewel thieves in the world. Irish father, French mother. Can speak 5 languages at least. He's been serving his sentence, but his time was up a few months ago." "Really? And where is he supposed to be now?" "Well, Mr. Cade, that's what we'd rather like to know." "The plot thickens," said Anthony lightly. "No chance of his turning up here, is there? But I suppose he wouldn't be interested in political memoirs, only in jewels." "There's no saying," said Superintendent Battle. "For all we know, he may be here already." "Disguised as a second footman? Splendid. You'll recognise him by his ears and cover yourself with glory." "Quite fond of your little joke, aren't you, Mr. Cade? By the way, what do you think of that curious business at Staines?" "Staines?" said Anthony. "What's been happening at Staines?" "It was in Saturday's papers. I thought you might have seen about it. Man found by the roadside. A foreigner. It was in the papers again today, of course." "I did see something about it," said Anthony carelessly. "Not suicide, apparently." "No, there was no weapon. As yet the man hasn't been identified." "You seem very interested," said Anthony, smiling. "No connection with Prince Michael's death, is there?" His hand was quite steady. So were his eyes. Was it his fancy that Superintendent Battle was looking at him with peculiar intentness? "Seems to be quite an epidemic of that sort of thing," said Battle. "But, well, I dare say there's nothing in it." He turned away, beckoning to a porter as the London train came thundering in. Anthony drew a faint sigh of relief. He strolled across the park in an unusually thoughtful mood. He purposely chose to approach the house from the same direction as that from which he had come on the fateful Thursday night, and as he drew near to it, he looked up at the windows, cajoling his brains to make sure of the one where he had seen the light. Was he quite sure that it was the second one from the end? And doing so, he made a discovery. There was an angle at the corner of the house in which was a window set further back. Standing on one spot, you counted this window as the first, and the first one built out over the council chamber as the second, but moved a few yards to the right, and the part built out over the council chamber appeared to be the end of the house. The first window was invisible, and the two windows of the rooms over the council chamber would have appeared to be the first and second from the end. Where exactly had he been standing when he had seen the light flash up? Anthony found the question very hard to determine. A matter of a yard or so made all the difference, but one point was made abundantly clear. It was quite possible that he had been mistaken in describing the light as occurring in the second room from the end. It might equally well have been the third. Now, who occupied the third room? Anthony was determined to find that out as soon as possible. Fortune favoured him. In the hall, Treadwell had just set the massive silver urn in its place on the tea tray. Nobody else was there. "Hello, Treadwell," said Anthony. "I wanted to ask you something. Who has the third room from the end on the west side? Over the council chamber, I mean." Treadwell reflected for a minute or two. "That would be the American gentleman's room, sir, Mr. Fish." "Oh, is it? Thank you." "Not at all, sir." Treadwell prepared to depart, then paused. The desire to be the first to impart news makes even pontifical butlers human. "Perhaps you have heard, sir, of what occurred last night?" "Not a word," said Anthony. "What did occur last night?" "An attempt at robbery, sir." "Not really? Was anything taken?" "No, sir. The thieves were dismantling the suits of armour in the council chamber when they were surprised and forced to flee. Unfortunately, they got clear away." "That's very extraordinary," said Anthony. "The council chamber again. Did they break in that way?" "It is supposed, sir, that they forced the window." Satisfied with the interest his information had aroused, Treadwell resumed his retreat, but brought up short with a dignified apology. "I beg your pardon, sir. I didn't hear you come in, and I didn't know you were standing just behind me." Mr. Isaacstein, who had been the victim of the impact, waved his hand in a friendly fashion. "No harm done, my good fellow. I assure you, no harm done." Treadwell retired looking contemptuous, and Isaacstein came forward and dropped into an easy chair. "Hello, Cade, so you're back again. Been hearing all about last night's little show." "Yeah," said Anthony. "Rather an exciting weekend, isn't it?" "I should imagine that last night was the work of local men," said Isaacstein. "It seems a clumsy amateurish affair." "Is there anybody about here who collects armour?" asked Anthony. "It seems a curious thing to select." "Very curious," agrees Mr. Isaacstein. He paused a minute and then said slowly, "The whole position here is very unfortunate." There was something almost menacing in his tone. "I don't quite understand," said Anthony. "Why are we all being kept here in this way? The inquest was over yesterday. The prince's body will be removed to London, where it has been given out that he died of heart failure, and still nobody is allowed to leave the house. Mr. Lomax knows no more than I do. He refers me to Superintendent Battle." "Superintendent Battle has something up his sleeve," said Anthony thoughtfully, "and it seems the essence of his plans that nobody should leave. But excuse me, Mr. Cade, you have been away." "With a string tied to my leg. I've no doubt that I was shadowed the whole time. I shouldn't have been given a chance of disposing of a revolver or anything of that kind." "Ah, the revolver," said Isaacstein thoughtfully. "That has not been found, I think." "Not yet. Possibly thrown into the lake in passing." "Very possibly." "Where is Superintendent Battle? I have not seen him this afternoon." "He has gone to London. I met him at the station." "Gone to London? Really? Did he say when he would be back?" "Early tomorrow, so I understand." Virginia came in with Lord Caterham and Mr. Fish. She smiled a welcome at Anthony. "So you're back, Mr. Cade. Have you heard all about our adventures last night?" "Why, truly, Mr. Cade," said Hiram Fish, "it was a night of strenuous excitement. Did you hear that I mistook Mrs. Revel for one of the thugs?" "And in the meantime," said Anthony, "the thug—" "Got clear away," said Mr. Fish mournfully. "Do pour out," said Lord Caterham to Virginia. "I don't know where Bundle is." Virginia officiated, and then she came and sat down near Anthony. "Come to the boathouse after tea," she said in a low voice. "Bill and I have got a lot to tell you." Then she joined lightly in the general conversation. The meeting at the boathouse was duly held. Virginia and Bill were bubbling over with their news. They agreed that a boat in the middle of the lake was the only safe place for confidential conversation. Having paddled out a sufficient distance, the full story of last night's adventure was related to Anthony. Bill looked a little sulky. He wished Virginia would not insist on bringing this colonial fellow into it. "It's very odd," said Anthony when the story was finished. "What did you make of it?" he asked Virginia. "I think they were looking for something," she returned promptly. "The burglar idea is absurd." "They thought the something, whatever it was, might be concealed in the suits of armour. That's clear enough. But why tap the panelling? That looks more as though they were looking for a secret staircase or something of that kind." "There's a priest's hole at Chimneys, I know," says Virginia. "And I believe there is a secret staircase as well. Lord Caterham would tell us all about it. What I want to know is, what can they have been looking for?" "It can't be the memoirs," said Anthony. "There's a great deal bulky package. They must have been something small." "George knows, I expect," said Virginia. "I wonder whether I could get it out of him. All along I felt there was something behind all this." "You say there was only one man," pursued Anthony, "but that there might be a possibility be another. As you thought, you heard someone going through the door as you sprang to the window." "The sound was very slight," said Virginia. "It might have just been my imagination." "That's quite possible, but in case it wasn't your imagination, the second person must have been an inmate of the house. I wonder now—" "What are you wondering at?" asked Virginia. "The thoroughness of Mr. Hiram Fish, who dresses himself completely when he hears screams for help downstairs." "There is something in that," agreed Virginia. "And then there's Isaacstein, who sleeps through it all. That's suspicious too. Surely he couldn't." "There's that fellow Boris," suggested Bill. "He looks an unmitigated ruffian. Michael's servant, I mean." "Chimneys is full of suspicious characters," said Virginia. "I dare say the others are just as suspicious of us. I wish Superintendent Battle hadn't gone to London. I think it's rather stupid of him. By the way, Mr. Cade, I've seen that peculiar-looking Frenchman about once or twice spying round the park." "It's a mix-up," confessed Anthony. "I've been away on a wild goose chase. Made a thorough ass of myself. Look here, to me the whole question seems to resolve itself into this. Did the men find what they were looking for last night?" "Supposing they didn't," said Virginia. "I'm pretty sure they didn't, as a matter of fact." "Just this. I believe they'll come again. They know, or they'll soon will know, that at battles in London. They'll take the risk and come again tonight." "Do you really think so?" "It's a chance. Now we three will form a little syndicate. Eversley and I will conceal ourselves with due precautions in the council chamber." "Oh, what about me?" interrupted Virginia. "Don't think you're going to leave me out of it." "Listen to me, Virginia," said Bill. "This is men's work." "Don't be an idiot, Bill. I'm in on this. Don't you make a mistake about it. The syndicate will keep watch tonight." And thus it was settled, and the details of the plan were laid. After the party had returned to bed, first one and then another of the syndicate crept down. They were all armed with powerful electric torches, and in the pocket of Anthony's coat lay a revolver. Anthony had said that he believed another attempt to resume the search would be made. Nevertheless, he did not expect that the attempt would be made from the outside. He believed that Virginia had been correct in her guess that somebody had passed her in the dark the night before, and as he stood in the shadow of an old oak dresser, it was towards the door and not the window that his eyes were directed. Virginia was crouching behind a figure in armour on the opposite wall, and Bill was by the window. The minutes passed at interminable length. 1 o'clock chimed, and then the half-hour, then 2, then half-hour. Anthony felt stiff and cramped. He was coming slowly to the conclusion that he had been wrong. No attempt would be made tonight. And then he stiffened suddenly. All his senses were on alert. He had heard a footstep on the terrace outside. Silence again, and then a low scratching sound at the window. Suddenly it ceased, and the window swung open. A man stepped across the still into the room. He stood quite still for a moment, peering round as though listening. After a minute or two, seeming satisfied, he switched on the torch he carried and turned it rapidly around the room. Apparently he saw nothing unusual. The 3 watchers held their breath. He went over to the same bit of panelled wall he had been examining the night before. And then a terrible knowledge smote Bill. He was going to sneeze. The wild race to the dew-laden park the night before had given him a chill. All day he had sneezed intermittently. The sneeze was now due, and nothing on earth would stop it. He adopted all the remedies he could think of. He pressed his upper lip, swallowed hard, threw back his head and looked at the ceiling, and at a last resort he held his nose and pinched it violently. It was no avail. He sneezed. A stifled, checked, emasculated sneeze, but a startling sound in the deadly quiet of the room. The stranger sprang around, and in the same minute Anthony acted. He flashed on his torch and jumped full for the stranger. In another minute they were down on the floor together. "Lights!" shouted Anthony. Virginia was at the ready, at the switch. The lights came on, true and full tonight. Anthony was on top of his man. Bill leant down to give him a hand. "And now," said Anthony, "let me see who you are, my fine fellow." He rolled his victim over. It was a neat, dark-bearded stranger from the Cricketers. "Very nice indeed," said an approving voice. They all looked up startled. The bulky form of Superintendent Battle was standing in the open doorway. "I thought you were in London, Superintendent Battle," said Anthony. Battle's eyes twinkled. "Did you, sir?" he said. "Well, I thought it would be a good thing if I was thought to be going." "And it has been," agreed Anthony, looking down at his prostrate foe. To his surprise, there was a slight smile on the stranger's face. "May I get up, gentlemen?" he inquired. "You are 3-1. Anthony kindly hauled him onto his legs. The stranger settled his coat, pulled up his collar, and directed a keen look at Battle. "I demand pardon," he said, "but do I understand that you are a representative from Scotland Yard?" "That's right," said Battle. "Then I will present you my credentials." He smiled rather ruefully. "I would have been wise to do so before." He took some papers from his pocket and handed them to the Scotland Yard detective. At the same time, he turned back the lapel of his coat and showed something pinned there. Battle gave an exclamation of astonishment. He looked through the papers and handed them back with a little bow. "I'm sorry you've been manhandled, monsieur," he said, "but you brought it on yourself, you know." He smiled, noting the astonishment and expression on the face of others. "This is a colleague we've been expecting for some time," he said. "Monsieur Lemoine, of the Secret of Chimneys."